Okay, well, this is a big treat of mine. You can bring him on the screen. I'm going to read his bio, not that anybody wouldn't know who he is. Peter Maher is a retired Canadian sportscaster, radio voice of the NHL's Calgary Flames from their move to Calgary. From 1980 until his retirement in 2014, he broadcast every Flames game for 33 years straight, announcing the games on the city's all-sports radio station, Sportsnet 960 The Fan, or Peter, as you know, Calgary Flames Radio, 66 CFR. Best known for bellowing, "Yeah, baby!" And after a significant moment, and after every Flames win, you can put it in the win column. And he began his broadcasting career at age 14, broadcasting the lineup for the Campbellton Softball League. Hall of Famer and a hero of mine, Peter Maher, joins us today. How you doing, Pete?
Pretty good, Rod. Thank you. Pleasure to be on your program.
A lot of people very excited to hear your voice and see your face again, Peter. I got so many things I want to get to with you. But how about these Calgary Flames? When's the last time you saw the excitement in this town where it is right now for this team that's won 10 in a row?
It's been a while. There's no question about that. I probably have to go back to 2004, which was the first carnation of Daryl Sutter as coach of the Flames. That was the great run to the Stanley Cup final and to Game 7, losing out to Tampa, unfortunately. And there's some similarities between then and what's happening now, because back then Daryl took over the season before, halfway through the campaign in 2002-03. And he coached them for about 40 games or so. They didn't really move up enough to have a playoff position, just as it was the case last year when he took over as coach of the Flames just beyond the midway point. Didn't get them into the playoffs, but there was a pretty big hole dug in there. But he certainly had staked his claim with the players on the team, just as he did then. And now he's got this team playing outstanding hockey, and certainly it's incredible. The 10-game win streak that they're on right now. The two 10-game win streak the Flames had were not part of broadcasts that I did, ironically, because the first one was when the team was in Atlanta in 1978-79, and the second one was after I had retired it happened in 2017-18. So it's got a lot of excitement going on in the city here.
Well, and by the way, you talk about your career. I do still have the letter that you wrote me in 1993 critiquing my play-by-play. And thankfully, unlike Dick Irvin, who told me to get out of the broadcasting business, Pete, he did. You were very, very gracious to me and kind, and I appreciate you doing that. And, it was not part of your career, but you had those long playoff runs in the Stanley Cup in 1989. And I wonder where you fall on this team, Peter, because Mark Steven came here yesterday and he said, pump the brakes. I'll be the bad guy and say this team hasn't had any playoff success, certainly since 04 and before that 89. Are they getting ahead of themselves in this town because of the lack of playoff success?
Well, I'm going to answer that in a lot of the ways Daryl Sutter would answer that question. Daryl made an interesting comment the other day that you may have seen, Rod, when they asked him about the 10-game win streak, and he said 10-game win streaks don't mean anything to me unless it's into the playoffs, or something to that effect is what he said. So, yeah, it may be a little early to get too excited, but nonetheless, it's been a while since this team has created this type of excitement in the city. And so it's justified that the people are excited for it. But, I wouldn't be planning any Stanley Cup parades right now. Just let things unfold as they go. And hopefully this team can continue to have a strong run of success and get themselves into the playoffs in a good position. And then, make some things happen when the postseason gets going. But definitely this team has, you look at it, it seems to be, very, very strong. The style of play that they play, the way Daryl has them going, is Daryl's style of hockey that he's had a lot of success with in the past, be it Chicago, be it San Jose, be it Calgary, Los Angeles, where he coached a couple of Stanley Cup winning teams. So you really like the depth that this team has right now. And I think the added addition of Toffoli last week was a big plus for the team as well.
Well, now, Peter, to the real fun stuff. The one burning question I have for you, and I have a few, but the one I want to know the most. Mike Vernon or Mika Kiprasov, who's the best goalie in Calgary Flames history?
I would say Mike Vernon because he won a Stanley Cup. So now,
It's
now
the only
having said
answer.
that, Mika Kiprusoff could say he won a Stanley Cup too, but got robbed of it in Game 6 of the that Stanley Cup final in 2004 on Marty Gelinas' goal that they didn't count. So that might even up the tilt. The scale a little bit between Kiprusoff and Vernon, but they both played in different eras when they were here in Calgary. And in Mike's time, it was when the high scoring NHL era, and he made a lot of saves when games were on the line. Remember talking recently with Terry Crisp, who of course was coach of that Flames Stanley Cup winning team, and Terry hadn't watched the final game against Montreal from 1989 until just recently. Maybe it was a year and a half, 2 years ago. And he came away from that saying, he said, I'd forgotten how well Mike Vernon had played in that game. And without his outstanding work, we wouldn't have won that game to win the Stanley Cup. And Mike was solid all through that Stanley Cup run. I remember when the Game 5, which was the night the Flames won the Cup in Montreal, or Game 6 in Montreal, when they won the Cup, I just waiting for the announcement of who was going to win the Most Valuable Player award from the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I made the comment on the air with my then color commentator, Doug Barkley. I said, I think it's going to be Mike Vernon. And it turned out it was Al MacInnis, but I understand later it was an extremely close vote that MacInnis won by one vote ahead of Vernon. So, Mike, when the games were on the line, he made all the big saves. In fact, in that playoff run in 89, he saved them in the opening round series against Vancouver. Game 7 of that series, which nobody expected was going to happen, but it did happen, went to Game 7 in the Saddledome. And the Canucks had numerous great scoring opportunities in that overtime period, but Vernon came up with some outstanding saves, including one off of Stan Smeal that still stands out in my mind, as well as a couple of others. And he kept them in the game, and then Joel Otto went down and scored the overtime winning goal. And after that, the Flames kind of breezed a little bit in the playoffs. So, but then having said all of that, watching Kiprusoff in that incredible run in 04, if it wasn't for his great work, that team wouldn't have gone that far in the playoffs. I mean, they got into the playoffs as a number 6 seed in the West and ended up beating out the pennant-winning teams in the first 3 rounds, first being Vancouver, then Detroit, which was a major upset, and then San Jose before taking on Tampa in the final. And, that was a Daryl Sutter team that won games 2-1, 3-2. There were not any high-scoring games in that time, and it was Kiprusoff's great work in the net that kept them in there. So maybe I could call it a draw between those two guys.
Well, you almost have to be the broadcaster, believe me.
Other than Vernon and Kiprusoff, the Flames have never had a goaltender be number 1 more than 3 years in a row. So Markstrom has another year to go to enter into that stage.
He's got a lot to prove before he's up with those other fellows, but I'm with you. And the other thing I would add, though, is that Mike Vernon was doing it in his hometown. And, and he starred with the Wranglers, and that couldn't have been easy. That has its benefits and its drawbacks. From the viewers, Matthew Decker writing says, many nights I'd have the radio on when I was supposed to be sleeping, listening to Peter call Flames games, the best in the business and one of the nicest people to grace this earth. From Kirk Sirota in Calgary. Hello, Peter. I had the pleasure of meeting you on my birthday back during one of the intermissions at the Saddledome. You are still a class act and the best. From Jeff, the Stamps fan. 1986 Smythe Division Final was the greatest playoff series ever. The Flames have done it. Yeah, baby. So they're all remembering it, Peter, as we talk. Now, here's another one I have for you. Rod Phillips. I knew, Peter, growing up in Saskatchewan, how lucky we were to have yourself, Rod Phillips, and over in Winnipeg, Kurt Kielbeck. But in these Flames-Oilers battles, the wars, how did you and Rod get along? I always wondered what your relationship was going up to the broadcast booth and these heated rivalries. And both Hall of Famers. What was it like then? What's it like now?
Well, we got along pretty well. No, there were never any real major incidents that happened. The only real incident that happened that really had nothing to do with Rod, but during that playoff series that you're talking about there in 1986, which, of course, the Oilers were supposed to win. They'd won the previous 2 Stanley Cups. They'd ran away with the regular season title. But the Flames found a way to get that series to 7 games and win Game 7. And that, baby, that you mentioned there, that was the first time that I used that yell. But it was interesting in the morning of Game 5 of that particular series. After the Oilers had their morning skate, this was a game being played in Edmonton, and I was asking, it was after they come off the ice, you usually ask a player to come aside with you and do about a 2 or 3 minute interview that you would record and then run it on the pregame show that night. Well, I had asked about 4 or 5 Oilers for an interview, and all of them said no. They just brushed me off and went by. Well, finally, I went over to their media relations guy for the Oilers and made the comment to him, look, I'm trying to get one of your guys for an interview that I can record to put on our pregame show and our broadcast tonight, and nobody seems to want to talk to me. And the media relations guy made the comment to me, we're not talking to you. And I kind of said, oh, pardon me, what seems to be the issue there? He said, well, we heard during the broadcast of the game the other night from Calgary that you were calling Wayne Gretzky, you were calling Wayne a whiner all through the broadcast. And I said, I beg your pardon? I never called Wayne a whiner once, let alone through the course of the broadcast. In fact, if you'd like, I'll get a copy of the tape recording of that game sent to you, and that can prove that I didn't make that comment about Wayne. And so he kind of walked away, and then he came back and he had Charlie Huddy come out and give me a 2 or 3 minute interview. And so when that is over, I went back to the media relations guy for the Oilers and I said, I'd like to talk to Wayne just to get this straight, because Wayne has always been friendly with me and always granted me one interview a year. So it was interesting. He went back in and he came out. He said, Rod, he said, Wayne will be out in about 5-10 minutes. So if you want to wait. So when Wayne came out, I got him aside and I said, Wayne, I understand there's some miscommunication here that you have heard that I made the comment that you were a whiner all through the broadcast of the game the other night from Calgary. And I said, I want to let you know that I did not. In fact, I'm going to have the tape recording of that game sent to the media relations office, and he can hear for himself to prove that I didn't call you the whiner. And he said to me, he said, when I heard that comment, he said, I wondered about it because there are times when I'd be driving around Edmonton and the Flames would be playing that night. I'd be listening to the Flames game on the radio, and I always found you a very fair broadcaster that was fair for both teams and players on both teams. So that was, that tells you what the height of the rivalry was back in that time, and we got that all resolved and went on from there. But that was one of the incidents that happened through all of that time, and that was an incredible series. Incidentally, that's the only time the Flames have beaten the Oilers in a playoff series in the history of it. In fact, they haven't had a playoff series since 1990, so we're due for one.
No kidding. Well, oh man, what a story! I'm reeling here, by the way. And Jeff, Jeff the Stamps fan writes in and says that makes me hate the Oilers even more. He says, was that Bill Tuwelli, by the way, that you were dealing with, Peter? At that
I was
time?
trying to say his name and I couldn't think of. Yeah, Bill Tuwelli was the guy, media relations guy. Yeah. So.
Well, the only reason I ask is because
he retired and moved to just outside Vancouver. He'd come to some of the Canuck games, and we had a good laugh about that back then too. So.
Peter, he's a regular viewer of this show, Bill Tuwelli. So he's probably he's emailed me. He's probably watching right now out in BC, making sure that we've got that story right. And I know that you nailed it. The Hall of Famer Peter Maher is with us on the broadcast today. Some of the viewer comments are great, Pete. Gino, the voice of the Okotoks Oilers, says, God bless Doug Barkley and Mike Rogers. Those were some fun times, right, with your color commentators, Pete? You got some stories about those guys and how much fun it was calling all those games. Were those the only two you worked with and Labardius at the end? Who all were your color guys?
Yeah, I worked with Doug Barkley for 21 years and Mike Rogers for 12 years. And then the final year of my Flame broadcast career, Peter Labardius was the color commentator. So they were 3 guys that were all very easy to work with and all different styles, but very, very informative from their knowledge of the game of hockey, and provided the listeners with some great insights while I just did the play-by-play, calling the action as it goes from one end to the other. So, yeah, Doug was a guy, a former NHL player, former NHL coach, who probably would have been a superstar in the NHL, but he lost his eye when he was playing with the Detroit Red Wings, and had his career come to an end earlier than it should have, after being one of the top defensemen in the league for his first 3 or 4 years in the league. And he had some great insights in the game. And then, of course, when Doug retired, Mike Rogers came on. And Mike, of course, had a very outstanding career both in the World Hockey Association and the NHL. One of the great things about working with Mike was, other than the fact that he really knew the game well, was that anytime we'd go to Detroit, we get an opportunity to sit down and have a beer or so with Gordie Howe, because Mike played with Gordie both in Hartford and the World Hockey Association, and also played with them elsewhere. So they had a real good friendship. So to get together with them and hear some great stories from them over the years. So and Peter Labarde's, of course, not a former player, but boy, he has some great insights into the game of hockey, and great knowledge of all the players that are playing in the games, and still doing a wonderful job on the Flame broadcasts that are going on these days on the Fan 960 with Derek Wills.
Well, it was
doing an outstanding job as well in the play-by-play role.
Oh, yeah, I'm really enjoying listening to those guys. But it was a magic time with yourself and those guys. And as you know, I went to Mount Royal, so driving around this town, I just hear your voice echoing, and it comes in my head all the time, and your voice is still strong. It reminds me of John Lynch. You must have known John Lynch, the Hall of Fame Rough Riders broadcaster, whom I just spoke with this morning. He's 82, and the voice is just strong like bull, still to this day. I don't know what it is. This must be a broadcaster thing. Anyways, BW.
I don't think I could broadcast a game and keep the strong voice today, though. It's good for a segment like this. I'd like to see you try. Maybe an alumni game or something. But BW is watching on YouTube. He says, Peter, what is your favorite story from the Corral days of the Flames? And do you think that magic could happen for Arizona going into a 5,000-seat arena for 3 years? Well, the beauty of I always said that broadcasting games from the Stampede Corral in Calgary was the best ideal broadcast location. I mean, you're almost on the ice. I mean, you were elevated a little bit, but you were right on top of the players. You could call the games real easily. And the other interesting aspect of it was that the crowd in the Saddle Dome, in the Corral, was right on top of the players. I mean, and the boards were high. The Flames, when they first came to Calgary from Atlanta, had a very physical team. And those high boards and the crowd being so close to the ice, I think it was intimidating to the opponents. And during that first year that the Flames played there, they lost only 5 games at home in the Corral that entire season. But the one time that stands out for me was in the final season of the Corral, the 1982-83 season. That was the year that Lanny McDonald scored what's still a club record 66 goals, and he scored 42 of those goals in the Corral. And I can still see him scoring a whole bunch of those goals as he'd go up the right wing boards and then hustle in behind the net, then get in front, get the puck, and fire it into the goal. And there are just so many memories from the Corral. It's kind of unfortunate, although the building's been there for a long time, but it got torn down over the last year or so. So no longer can go in there and relive any of those memories that we had from those great times in the Corral while the Saddle Dome was being built. Now, I think it's going to be a total different situation in Arizona, where they go to a brand new arena that they're going into that has the 5,000 seats in a whole different time for the NHL. So, and I don't think that the crowd in Arizona is going to be quite as boisterous as that gang was in the Corral back in those first 3 years that the Flames played there. So it's going to be real interesting to see how that goes there. This is a team that doesn't get that big a crowd in the other arena that they played in the Phoenix area. And so I always believed that if the Coyotes ever had a pretty good team on the ice, that they would have drawn some real good crowds out of the arena that they've been playing in for the past number of years. But unfortunately, for most of the years that they played there, didn't have a very good team. So it's going to be, I'm actually amazed that the team is still in Phoenix, to be quite frank, given how little response they get from the crowds there.
I know. I'm not entirely certain why they keep driving that square peg in the round hole, but from our viewers, Ron Thompson in Calgary watching on Game Plus TV says, excited to hear from Peter, the absolute best radio hockey commentator ever, Hall of Famer. Can you ask Peter if he would come back for one game if Calgary makes the playoffs? We in Calgary would be so honored. That from Rob. From Ron. When we talk about your Hall of Fame induction, Peter, what can you tell me about that time when you learned of it, what you felt, and when you went in? Can you talk about that for a bit?
Well, when I learned of it, I was driving in my car, and I got a phone call. And nowadays, I wouldn't answer the phone if it rang while I was in the car. But in those days, I did, and it was a great call from Bill Hay, and also Dick Irvin was on there, and they told me that I had been selected to be the recipient of the Foster Hewitt Memorial Award, and would be honored at the Hockey Hall of Fame. So I then stopped the car and parked it, and then had a nice conversation with the guys. And that was the original thought time that I got the word that I was going to be inducted in the hockey shrine in Toronto. And the thing that I look back on it, and the Hall of Fame ceremony is a whole weekend. It kind of starts on Friday and it goes through until Monday. In my situation, the Flames had a game in Vancouver on the Saturday night of the Hall of Fame induction weekend. So I decided that I would broadcast the game in Vancouver on the Saturday night, and then take the red-eye flight, take the flight out the next morning, early the next morning, at 6 o'clock, I think it was, and then fly to Toronto. But my family had all gone to Toronto on Thursday, so they had already been part of the festivities on Friday and Saturday and most of Sunday. By the time I got there, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Toronto time. And all of my family and a bunch of my friends that were there, they were all in the lobby of the Harbour Castle Hotel in Toronto, meeting me there with a big ovation. But most of them are still hungover from being at the event that they had gone to on Saturday night. So I had to catch up in that vein with all the crew. But it was quite an interesting couple of days, because I got to then soak it all in on Sunday night, which is the night when they had the parties. And I was fortunate enough that the year that I was honored at the Hockey Hall of Fame was the same year that former Flames owner Harley Hotchkiss was also honored and inducted into the Hall of Fame. So on the Sunday night, the party night, the Flames had reserved the Grand Hall of the Hall of Fame to have a party. And so, of course, all of my crew was in on that party as well. And then afterwards, at a restaurant that was nearby the Hall of Fame, we had our own party and had all the gang that was at the Hall of Fame come over to that one. And so that went on till well into the night. And of course, it was a wonderful time there. And then the next day, with all of the ceremonies that went on to honor me at the Hall of Fame, that I'll never forget that particular time. The only thing that I regret about it is that I still haven't gone to have a look at my plaque in the Hockey Hall of Fame, because that night after the event was all over, there were so many things that were going on. Didn't go into the Grand Hall, or went into the Grand Hall, but didn't have a look at where the portrait was of myself. But one of these days, hopefully, I'll get there and have an opportunity to have a look at that.
We opened this hour, which of course brought to you by Great Western Original 16 Beer. I mentioned the letter from the viewer about the Olympics. And one viewer has written in, Zach in Calgary, says, Peter, do you have a favorite story from the 2010 Olympics? And I forgot that you had the radio call of that iconic tournament and the golden goal by Sid the Kid. That must have been a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, that was an incredible 2 weeks in Vancouver for that Hall of Fame opportunity, or the Olympic opportunity to broadcast all of the Team Canada men's games in that tournament. And you talk about all the excitement from the men's team winning the gold medal with Sidney Crosby scoring the winning goal. And what was interesting to me was that on that winning goal that Crosby scored, he was set up by Jerome McGinley. And of course, McGinley and Crosby were the two players on the Canadian team that I knew the best. Jerome, obviously, being a member of the Flames for all those years, and Sidney being from the Maritimes, which is, I'm also from the Maritimes. He's from Nova Scotia, and I'm from New Brunswick. I go back in the summer and play in charity golf tournaments there, and that's where I got to meet Sidney. So it was kind of nice that the big goal for the Canadian team to gain the gold medal in overtime would come from two guys that on the team that I knew the best and had the great pleasure of calling that goal. I also, 3 days before that, was in the building. I didn't call the game, but I was there watching the game where the Canadian women won the gold medal in their competition. And I remember sitting up in the seats and I was then doing a live broadcast back to the Fan 960 in Calgary, because every day I would do a show at 8 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. And the women's game ended a little after, just before I was to go on the air. And so I was on the air, sitting up in the seats in Vancouver. And when the players came on the ice, they were smoking cigars and drinking beer, and they were having themselves a great fun time out on the ice. And I was giving that a live commentary back to the audience in Calgary. And of course, that got a lot of play on television later on when the team came out on the ice with the cigars and drinking beer and all that sort of thing. So there were a lot of great memories from that 2-week time that I had in Vancouver. And of course, capping it all off on the final day with that big goal scored by Sidney Crosby, capped it off in great fashion. It's one of the highlights of my career, being able to call that goal and Canada winning the gold medal. I remember how the building went so silent when the United States team scored the tying goal in the closing minutes of the regulation time, and how all through the intermission, how everybody was kind of on edge, hoping that the Canadian team could pull the game out, but were real worried since they then were going into an overtime game. Another interesting aspect of that in the Olympics, you were broadcast from a location in the lower seating bowl of the Coliseum there in Vancouver, not in the regular broadcast booth, which was way up high. So you're right in among the crowd, and had an opportunity to chat with them during the intermissions, and certainly during that intermission before the overtime. There was a lot of nervousness in that building, but that was relieved when the winning goal was scored by Crosby.
Yeah, it had to be one of the biggest broadcasts of your career and biggest games. And Pete, we only got 2 minutes here, but I wonder if you ever envision a day that Theo Fleury will be welcomed into the Hockey Hall of Fame, have his number retired here. I don't want to necessarily get into the reasons why they haven't been, but I was just with him last month and at his house, and I just love him. You saw him come in, you saw him leave. He's got to be a special guy to you. He's a very special person, and obviously a special hockey player.
Yes, I sincerely hope that he does eventually get inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and that his number 14 gets retired at the Saddledome or the new building or whatever. Would be better, I guess, if it were in the Saddledome before the new building gets built, and hopefully we're going to eventually get the new building. But I nominated him for both the Alberta Sports Hall of Fame and the Alberta Hockey Hall of Fame, and he was a first ballot entry on both of those, but unfortunately, he hasn't met with the same degree of success in getting into the Hockey Hall of Fame. But hopefully, one day down the road, the selection committee there will select him for the Hall of Fame. He certainly deserves it. And to me, and I've told this to Theo, is that the day that Paul Correa was inducted into the Hall of Fame, that's when I said Theo definitely belongs in the Hall of Fame. Now, this is no disrespect to Paul Correa. He was a really good hockey player, an outstanding player, a great person. I had a lot of interviews that I did with him, but I still feel that the credentials that Theo has are better than the credentials that Paul Correa has that got him into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So hopefully one day Theo will enjoy the opportunity of being inducted into Hockey Shrine.
I couldn't agree more. Stanley Cup, Olympic gold, played in the World Juniors, represented his country. And I said to Theo, isn't it enough to know that you've had a Hall of Fame career? And he's like, no. He would like that, to be recognized. And I certainly appreciate him for that. Peter, from the viewers, Benjamin says it's awesome.
A number of occasions, Theo and I. So he definitely deserves to be there. We're both members of the Cottonwood Golf Club, so we often see each other there and have a good chat. And hopefully one day we'll have a chat with him being honored at the Hall of Fame and being inducted.
I bet you do see him there a lot because I know how much he loves golf. Ben Gates says it's awesome hearing these stories. Well, he does it a lot more, I think. But he says, it's awesome hearing these stories from Peter Maher, one of the best broadcasters ever. And there's no doubt about that. Peter, you've long known what I think about you and your career and as a person and a broadcaster. I appreciate you coming on. Everybody's loved it. Thanks. I'm glad to see things are going so well for you.
Well, a pleasure chatting with you, Rod, and much success with your show. It's going great. And I want to thank all those people that took time to text into you with those kind comments. Thank you all very much.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Be well.
You too.
Hockey Hall of Famer Peter Maher joining us from his Calgary home. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching the RP Show on YouTube. And don't forget, we're live daily on YouTube from noon to 2 Eastern. If you like what you see, hit subscribe. And if you like the program, check around for other segments of the Rod Pedersen Show here on YouTube.